Hey, Rani here. Shall we make a game? Now, it is much to my chagrin that I had to skip 2 days there as I was quite incapacitated, but I wasn't doing nothing. I might not have had the energy to stream and, actually, work on things properly, but I have had a bit of a think about what I'm doing and experiment a little bit while, between passing out and stuff. So, thing number one that's immediately obvious is that now these highlights work and you can kind of like highlight over them. And the reason for this is that, if I bring around my list of changes I've made, this is one of them. Text color can now actually be controlled at render time. So in the image sort of library, there's now the ability to layer a color on top with modulation, meaning that you can say, take a font of white text, you can color it red, color it green, whatever. Previously you couldn't do that, it would only just copy the exact pixels. So that's a new feature. Delete that one off. The next change is, this is probably one of the bigger ones. So previously, right, every single kind of like, you got an entity, which is like the equivalent of a game object in Unity. And in Unity, a game object has a transform. So, this angel has a position, and then like the mesh component just attaches to the entity, and then it kind of inherits the position of the game object itself. I didn't do that when I built this this engine. Instead, I figured, well, what if I had, say, like an angel, and they had like a separate piece for the halo, a separate piece for the visible body, and I was like, well, I'd want them to be transformed differently because they're going to be positioned and things like that. Maybe one of them spins or whatever. And I've come to realize that doesn't really happen. Not in the real world. And if I wanted that, I could always just make two entities. Whereas quite often, I actually want everything to do with an entity to kind of come off the same transform. So if there's footstep sounds, I obviously want those coming from the same position that the model's in. If people are looking at the character, well, I want them to look at the same location. So I've actually moved the storage of, hang on, I've lost the position here. Previously, I had like a list of transforms directly in, say, like the mesh component. Whereas now, they're stored up in the entity. And that means that it has a couple more advantages, actually, in addition to kind of like, reducing some complexity that needs to be there. It means that when it comes to implementing things like, say, a dialog box that needs to be kind of like attached to an object, previously it would have needed a special case where, I'd have to either have some code that tells the dialog box to move around the screen as the character moves or whatever, or maybe the dialog box would have needed special case code to go, well, it's attached to an animated mesh. Well, it needs to do this. Oh, it's attached to a non-animated transparent mesh. Well, it needs to go down a different path to get its transform information because it's part of the component, not part of the entity. That's no longer the case, and I'm going to be able to attach this directly to an entity, which is going to be good. Yep, and one of the nice things about this is that it now means I actually have kind of like a global queue of matrices, and I'm actually able to run through and basically just like a loop and just basically hit all of the matrices and multiply them by the camera in one run. So that might actually be a speed up, and it means that when it comes to things like being able to click on objects, we'll already have the matrices there ready to go. So that's nice. Yeah, can I get rid of that? Components now have metadata. I'm considering changing how this works now, but when you create a component, you can now pass in just basically this arbitrary number. And this is actually really important for speeding up certain operations. So for example, previously, there was stuff inside, say here, inside the animated mesh component where you had your list of mesh components, and then you go, well, I've got component ID number 3, and you'd be like, well, I don't know what that actually translates to. Like it's component number 3, but mesh component, it could be 7, could be 1, could be any of them. So you'd have to like scan for this list and find how that links up to the component you have. That's no longer the case, and the reason for that is you can just get this number out of the component and go, well, I know exactly which sort of slot to be getting that information from now. So that's good. I've added a pre-render queue. The idea behind that is that if you have something that you need to run between the main game logic and actually putting stuff on the screen, so you need to know where the camera is, you can put it in there. So for example, if you've got like, say, a crosshair that you want to attach to a character model, you could put it there as a silly example, because then you'd know exactly where the camera and the object is. You're just doing basically like some final tweaks before it goes on the screen. But I might remove it, as I don't think it's necessary anymore. Redesign the camera API. So previously, the way this worked was there was like a global variable that had kind of like the camera sort of like model view matrix in it. Sorry, not the model view projection matrix. And whenever you called into, say, one of these cameras, they would basically like manipulate global variables. Doesn't work like that anymore. Instead, the camera itself internally on the stack allocates a couple of matrices, and then, where is it? Calls into the camera and the lets the camera that you've set actually fill this in for you. So that actually removes a ton of global state. Quite a nice little change. Matrices are now named more. I got a lot done while I was basically completely incapacitated. Matrices are now named to be more consistent. I previously just called them all transform, and it's like, what kind of transform? Means nothing. Of course it's a transform, it's a matrix. Whereas I've now like very consistently gone for the model, so that's like placing the object in the scene, view, that's placing the camera in the scene, and projection, basically the camera lens. Implemented hover and active states, already kind of showed those. And the final one is one I'm rethinking a bit. So I had this, have all these components, and previously they all had their own totally separate implementations of kind of resource management. I don't have an allocator, meaning I have a fixed number of kind of like buckets, right? So you can imagine, I've got, what do you do that Visual Studio Code? What are you doing, Visual Studio Code? This is a text file, it's not code, stop. Let's say I had, 10 buckets, and I could put a mesh in one of these. And, I put a mesh there, put a mesh there, put a mesh there, mesh there, mesh there. Okay. But then I delete this one. Now, this means that when I'm trying to render them, well, I want to just, go A, C, D, E. I want to skip over this slot if possible. And when it comes to actually making a new one, say I want to put F somewhere, I want to be able to find an empty slot very quickly. Right. This kind of means that no particular data structure is particularly suited to this. You effectively want to kind of shuffle these down a slot so that when you're kind of like rendering, when you're going through them, which happens, 60 times a second, so you want it to be quite fast. You don't want to be having to skip over empty slots. You don't want to have to be checking, is this slot occupied? And likewise, when you're looking for an empty slot, you want to be able to go, oh yeah, well, just put it there. We know exactly where the empty slot is just by, we don't have to scan through the list to find an empty slot. Right. But there isn't a perfect solution to this. So, if the act of kind of like, if I put this back the way it was, to say, eliminate this gap here, I basically have to copy this down to here, copy this down to here, copy this down to here. And if you've got, say, like, 50 bytes per item, which isn't unreasonable, point at, if you've got something like an animated mesh, you've got pointed to a mesh, you've got pointed to an animation, you've got pointed to this, that, and the other. You could be looking at, many kilobytes copied down because you happen to delete the first item in the list. That's not great. It means performance can actually suffer a bit. You can get a bit of a hitch when things get removed from the scene. Okay, so that's not great. But it would at least mean you can just go to the end of the list and put new items there. Fantastic. But again, not great because you've got that overhead of having to copy all the items down. So another way you can do it is by, if I leave these as they were, if I have all of the data kind of like in these buckets like this, and then I have a list of buckets that are basically just a list of which buckets to get them out of. So in this case, it'd be like 0, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, because it's saying like, skip 1 because there's nothing in it. And this is what I've currently done. This is what I did yesterday, was I made it so there's basically almost, there's like it's a list of fixed buckets that have all the data in them, and then a list of the indices to go to get the information. So you can just scan through this and go, right, 0, 2, 3, 4. Now, one of the games I eventually want to build with this engine is going to have a lot of entities in the scene, probably over 500. Right, so I want it to be cheap to add and remove objects because they're going to be added and removed all the time. I want it to be cheap to iterate the list. A problem with this is that it means that you're reading from memory in a very, very disorganized manner. At the moment, this is going like from beginning to end, but like let's say that I put F in there. You'd end up with it. You'd end up with that. So it would go, well, there. Which means that because memory comes from, because you load memory in pages, there's a good chance it'll get further on down the list and come back here and then have to load this page back in again. You're basically not accessing memory in the most efficient way possible, and that could actually cause really unpredictable performance. If say like the ordering between the kind of like the dense array, the kind of queue, and the sort of heap became mismatched, you could end up with some really, really inefficient memory access patterns. And I don't really know what the best solution to this is, because it seems like none of the standard sort of schemes for, none of the standard schemes for building an array like this are necessarily good in all situations. Like, I don't want adding and removing to be slow. I don't want to ever be scanning through the list to find, a particular item. I want to always be able to go, you've got item number 3. Just look in the third bucket. Oh yeah, that was the other issue I didn't mention. Of course, if I have 5 items, I remove the second one, and then I remove all of the items down one. Well, if I knew my item was in the third bucket, well, it no longer is. It's now in the second bucket, right? Meaning that anything that had like an ID or a reference is now stale, which is why I was doing the scans. But yeah, not entirely sure which the best solution would be. I mean, I've tried to like do a best of both worlds by having a dense queue of indices and also a linked list of just so you can find them quickly. But this is quite memory intensive, and the performance isn't great because, like I say, it's a very disorganized, scattered memory access pattern. It's just not very good for it's annoying. I'll say it's not a problem right now, but it would be a problem if I built some of the games I want to build with this engine later on. So what I'm considering doing as kind of a best I can do kind of is leaving the gap, right? Just leaving a gap there, and just iterating over it and just accepting, I'm going to have to take a hit on, say, reading memory for buckets that are empty. Now, the reason for that is it's not very likely they'd stay empty for long. You think about this, if I create the next item, chances are it's going in there, and we'll get a nice contiguous list again, a nice dense array. So I might end up doing that. But again, it might end up being case by case. For example, the timer queue, you want that sorted by the the order of the events so that you're not processing events that aren't going to happen for a while. But that said, hang on, that might not actually be true, because you do have to process the whole list, because you have to decrement the remaining number of frames on each item. So I don't know. There's so many ways you can design memory and lay it out, and I'm not sure which one's the best. Might even be case by case. Oh, but the other thing I was just about to mention is, whereas 3D models, for the most part, transparent models are a bit different, but most models are opaque. You can render them in any order, yeah, and the depth buffer is responsible for sorting them correctly. That's not really true for, say, 2D objects. For example, if I drew this first and then drew this second, you wouldn't want this to draw behind this just because there happened to be a gap in the list of sprites. That would be really strange. That wouldn't make any sense. So I don't know. This might end up being very, 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 very case by case. Right, with all that out of the way, what am I working on next? Well, what I'm going to do next is, because now the idea of a transform in 3D is baked into, I'm just going to start some music in the background, is now baked into the entity, and of course these are components of an entity. I should be able to now actually use 3D transforms on these. I think I've currently got these dialogues attached to the world. Let's go have a look. Where is it? Where's my list component? There it is. Yeah, it's currently attached to the world. Let's just get rid of all this. Let's instead attach it to the protagonist. And I think I've got in here, yeah, I've got like a position. I'm going to get rid of that position, and I'm going to instead give it an offset from the origin so that we can, say, place it above his head. Let's get rid of that. And let's redocument as this. I think I did rewrite this at some point, but no, I lost it. Okay, right. I did rewrite this function prototype at one time, but I've lost it since. Okay, the point in 3D space that the list should attach to relative to the entity's transform on the x-axis. Now I am also going to put these inside the image component, and I'm just going to pass them through. Get rid of that too. All good. Okay, I blathered for nearly 20 minutes. That's good. Yeah, that was probably good. I probably straightened out a few ideas in my head. Yeah, I've still got some scans in here, like the relationship between a list and its components. That's not ideal. Kind of not a fan of that, but what can you do? Right. Where's my create function? Where is it? There it is. Get rid of those two and put you there. Now this is going to probably break a lot of things because, yeah, this is going to make a lot of my code in here angry. Good. Yeah, so I've got a lot of places I'm currently using that offset, but that should be fine, as we will not actually need that offset any longer. Hang on, I'm just having a brain meltdown. Because the image component is going to have these new parameters as well for location positioning, and it's just going to pass them down. But we don't actually keep a record anymore of where the list is on the screen, just where the thing is it's attached to. That does mean if I ever want a This is going to complicate things if I ever want a menu that isn't attached to an object in the scene. We'll deal with that later. Now this does mean there's going to be a slight inefficiency here, as we're going to end up with a, basically going to take the exact same coordinate in each case for each line of this and transform it. But generally, most objects aren't going to have more than like 5-ish components. That should be fine. That shouldn't be an issue. Something that's just occurred to me actually is maybe there's a way I could make this more efficient. I was saying earlier that I have to, sort of scan through the list of items to determine which items belong to which list. I guess if I just fix the number of items, I wouldn't need to do that. If I had like, say, a maximum of, say, 10 items per list, I wouldn't need to do any of that. I just know exactly where they'd be. I have to think about that. Yeah, what's it doing? What's this talking about? Why is that underlined in red? What's it talking about? Oh, whatever. Right, next up we need to actually store this information. So one of the things I did do when trying to make a bit of an optimization here is I've put all the information needed to display an image together, because you tend to access that in a nice linear line. So what I mean when like you start having to think about things in a kind of more, so if I'm putting it, more kind of like, use case specific, rather than going like, well, this kind of list is always the best. You have to start thinking about things in a more kind of like use case driven way. Did I make a thing in here with the actual location? Yes, I did. That's actually good, because I'm going to use that to pass it down to the items when I append them. So copy our coordinate over. Now, initially, this is going to be in a very weird position. It's probably going to appear on the floor or something. That's actually fine. Doesn't matter. Yeah, I'm definitely not back up. I'm definitely not back up to full speed yet. I'm definitely a bit kind of hazy still, but definitely better than I was. So let's take these coordinates. So let's compact. That's it. Okay, right. Yeah, I'm definitely not back with it yet. So there you go, list component index of 1. So we're going to get the location of this particular list, and then we're going to dump out the coordinate like that, nice and simple. Okay, that's now happy with that. And what am I going to do next? I'm probably going to use it in here, right? It's going to be a bit in here where I'm layering it onto the screen. Where do I call this? Because I might actually want a function sort of called before all this that actually calculates the real positions on the screen. Kind of caches them somewhere useful, And I might actually make a separate... Yes, I'm going to make a separate list of these. Okay. So it's actually called in here. This is called from pointer advance, which is here. Now here we have a bit of a chicken and egg problem because you can't really, this is kind of annoying. So you ideally want all of your input dealt with before you start processing any game logic, right? But you don't know where these objects are until you've processed your game logic. So one of them has to be a frame behind, and you can't really avoid that. I guess it just has to be. Yeah, that's annoying, but we'll deal with it. Yeah, so we're going to make a separate struct for the information needed to calculate the final real position on the screen. Get rid of that. Oops. Okay. Yeah, so basically we're going to loop through this and we're going to calculate where exactly on the screen we're putting it based on the information in here. So can't type. I'm actually going to make it a kind of like a function here that calculates that, that kind of refreshes the data for one particular image component. And the reason for that is we actually want to make sure that's calculated correctly at the time it's created. Do we? Actually, no, we're not. That doesn't matter, like at all. We'll always, in every circumstance, we'll always, yeah, because we'll be creating kind of components here, right? Oh, unless the script executes first. You know what? I'm going to make a bit of a design change in here. I am going to make it so that, yeah, I'm going to make it so that the script execution, the bit that actually kind of like puts all the objects in the scene, actually happens midway through a frame, which sounds like a bit of a weird way of doing it, and it actually is, but it means these will never be interacting with, because otherwise it means that, right, okay, let me explain what I'm talking about here. So you have these here, which are actually going to put the initial objects in the scene, right? So if you're at the very start of the game, it'll run the introduction script. It'll put like the protagonist, the background, and all that kind of stuff, and start their animations. Now, if I had this here, that means that you don't actually see the first frame because the gameplay logic immediately runs for a frame. I actually want it before, so it'll happen after the first render. So it'll come to here, nothing will happen because none of this, there won't be anything in any of these queues, right? There won't be anything in the advanced timer queue. And then, and only then, we then put things in the scene, and then we do all the rendering of it, and the next time we come back around, we then go, right, based on what, the game logic that we just, the game state we just set up in the first render, now advance it. This won't run because it's not the first frame. Then we render it. That makes a ton more sense to me personally. It's weird, and I'll put a comment in there explaining exactly why I've done that. This is one of the cases where I feel I need to explain it. Oh, actually, you know what would make a lot more sense? That. Don't run any of that game logic stuff at all on the first frame. Just put it in the scene and render it. But then on the subsequent run through, don't run the script, just advance the state. That makes a ton of sense to me. Right. So this is our code here to actually, yeah, this is our code here to actually put them on the screen. So, yeah, we have, this is the data structure I was talking about earlier, which I'm not quite sure on. So we have here, we have both a pool, which is basically a linked list that's used to basically find empty IDs, so unused kind of slots. And then we have a queue that basically keeps a list of the slot numbers in a dense array. So we can just go from start to finish of that array, not have to even think about whether there's going to be a gap. Not quite sure if it's the right way of doing it, to be honest. But that means that when it comes to actually working our way through, we actually are working through the queue, the sort of dense list, and we're getting the number of the slot that we're going to be working with. So this might mean we end up doing slot 2, 4, 1, 3. Yeah, you might end up doing it in a really logical order, but at least means you're not trying to skip slots. I'm not sure which is a win yet. Right. Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good. So we have the so the display is basically all the stuff you need to place it on the screen. So that includes things like the image, it includes things like the the exact coordinates on the screen, and we use that when calculating comparing the mouse cursor position. So that's why it's all kind of kept together as well. And then we have this, which is just for its location. So its 3D coordinate, its offset relative to that 3D coordinate. So next step is we need to, oh, what else do we need? We actually need to know which entity we're dealing with because we need its transform. We could go fetch the components out. However, this would mean like several layers of indirection. What we could do instead is actually store a reference to its model view projection matrix in here. And then we populate that at the time of, yeah, we populate it here. We actually, because I think we already have the, yeah, we already have the entity ID here, so we can use it to go get the matrix, yeah. Okay, so now we have the matrix, we have the, yeah, we have a matrix, we have our, wait, how's the site got there? Everything we now need, we now have everything that we need to calculate where the thing is going to be on the screen. All we need to do is find the code I was in the middle of updating. Here it is. So, are you going to help me here, Visual Studio Code, or are you just going to look at me? No? Okay. All right. So we have our point in 3D space. That's the location. Why is this thing like acting so weird? It's not like all the IntelliSense is broken. What do you mean it's not a component type name? Huh? What are you on about? It's right. It's right there. What do you mean? I'm so confused. What is this on about? Don't know. Let's try reloading Visual Studio Code. It might have gotten confused. It does happen from time to time. And, oh, that hasn't stopped my web server. Good. What is this on about? It's definitely defined. Oh my god, what? Well, while I'm here. Right. What is it on about? Maybe we'll get a more, reasonable error message out of the compiler. Oh, was it? I started writing a function here and just abandoned it, and it just like got completely thrown by my use of the word void. Right. I think the reason it doesn't like that is it's not assignable. Okay, is it happy with that? Okay, we're getting there, we're getting there. Right, so we're going to calculate where on the screen we're going to be putting this dialog box. Well, this image component, which is part of a dialog box. So we have the location relative to the character model, and we have the matrix, the kind of transform that's applied to it. And then we have the image, which is going to be the video buffer. And then we're going to output the row, column, and depth. So let's do that now. I did see something about a faster way of like doing multiple outputs. So think about like some kind of hack that puts stuff on the stack, but I doubt it's going to be a bottleneck for us here. So something we need to be careful with here is because we're actually transforming this to a 2D point from a 3D point, it's possible that there isn't actually a valid coordinate. So for example, if it's behind us, it should go somewhere, but not somewhere we can see it. Now, it needs to have a coordinate for the rest of the code to work. So I'm actually just going to make it, say, go 10,000 pixels to the edge of the screen. Why not? Yeah. So if it's not a number, so if it's like, behind us or something, and we can skip the render entirely if that's the case. And we're not even going to bother we're not even going to bother updating the column position because again, it's, yeah, it'll be pushed off screen by that. We don't need to do any more consideration. And we're not using the depth at all, so we can leave that as is. Let's see what that does. Does that build? Not quite. Oh yeah. Helps if you actually get your information. Oh, I think I got distracted there because I was trying to get the IntelliSense to work. I'm doing something wrong here. Yep, there we go. Yep, I wasn't filling in the individual items of the location. I was just basically trying to overwrite the whole location with just the 1x coordinate. That was smart. At the moment, that's always going to be 0. This will change when we're actually aligning the lists horizontally. Okay, it's doing a lot of the complaining about subscripts. Get rid of that. It's good. And these should be locations. Did I make this a 2D array? I don't remember. Yes, I did. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It's just however I feel about it. Means that the colours I don't think are, just because it gets a bit confusing. Okay, so what that does. Oh, it's still not compiling. Ah, yeah, it's because I've changed how this works, haven't I? So I can get rid of these two arguments no longer there. Okay, this should place the dialog box's top left corner at his feet. Should. Let's find out. Builds should be slightly faster as I've halved the number of font sprites by recalling them in engine. Come on, you can do it. There we go. And lo and behold, it's positioned it at his feet. Excellent. So let's try moving it up, say 1.6 meters, because he's slightly, 1.7 meters is about average, right? But he's slightly shorter than that. They should put the top left corner. Or my browser can freeze, that works too. Come on, browser. You can do it. Maybe you can't, I don't know. Yes, that's basically placed it at 1.6 meters above his head. So, I'm going to save my progress there. Might not look like much progress, but definitely is progress, I can show you. And my tracking stopped working great. Okay, so now we can log that as make image components 3D. I guess is a good way of describing it. I've heard worse ways of describing that kind of thing. So next up, we need to be able to do alignment. And this is going to get a bit complicated. So this 0 here needs to become the total width of the entire... Oh, actually, hang on. Yeah. Okay. Okay, we got this. Yeah, so I'm just thinking out loud here. I need to be able to calculate kind of like the offset for the list as a whole and then pass that down. So although I did remove previously the I've got the total columns, do I have the total rows? No, I don't. So that'd be very useful to have. I'm going to store in here offsets. And I'm going to recalculate them whenever you add to here. And that's when I can take into account these alignments and things. Yeah, I added quite a lot of extra functions here because I'm doing things like repainting the content of items, and that gets quite complicated, especially when you've got, like, say, multiple states all need updating. So... hang on, I'm just reading this and I'm trying to remember what I was actually doing here. Right. So I now need to calculate the... So, this is the confusion I'm having here. So total columns is the width of the item, but because the dialog itself is the same width as its widest item, they end up actually being the same. Now, total rows is the height, but it's the height of the item because they're separate, because obviously the list is all the items stacked up vertically. So I don't actually have a record at the minute of exactly how tall the list is, so I'm going to calculate that now. let's initialize the list offset here to 0 every time. Because initially it is going to be 0 regardless of how it's aligned because there's nothing in it. And then we're going to check the horizontal and vertical alignments and update these offsets if required, and then pass that down to, pass that down to everything inside. I've got a bit of a chicken and egg here thing because I'm working my way through this. I have like this list of all the items and I'm working my way through it, and I'm resizing the items if I need to, but I don't know how wide the list should actually be until I've hit at least one item in here. Because I can, yeah, I need to do my positioning afterwards. That's kind of annoying and confusing, but that's how it is. So to do calculate new offsets, to do apply new offsets. And in this bit up here, I have a bit where it swaps out the image. This needs to actually take the list index. Now I did annoyingly just have the list index in here, didn't I? Right, so we have our item. So we have the component ID of our item, then we turn it into a sort of like a bucket ID, a bucket index, so which bucket we're getting the item data out of. Then we use that to get the component ID of the list it's part of, and then we get the bucket number of the, oh, this is getting too complicated. Just gonna make sure I definitely stored that in the meta kind of column. Yeah, that's right. So we can get that very cheaply out of there. It's probably a better way of doing that. Anyway. So now that we know which list we're working with, we can then grab the offset of that list and, nope, that's columns, not rows. Oh my God, brain's melting. So that's when we're actually replacing an image. So that when we're swapping from, say, like the idle state to the hovered state to the active state or any of the other states, we're going to calculate the exact position we previously had the image component in. Right. So now we're going to have a look at the alignment. What do we do in the font if I don't recognize an alignment? Oh, I do nothing. Fair. Shouldn't happen, I guess. So, if it's middle, we need to do some stuff. If it's right aligned, we need to do some stuff. Although that said, what the middle and the right do is actually very similar. And I'm actually going to make it so that, yeah. Okay, right. Calculate the right alignment, and then if it's middle aligned, just divide it by 2. No, wait, it doesn't work. It's the wrong way around. Ah! Yeah, let's just do 2 checks. So if it isn't left aligned, right, then we're going to do some calculations. And if it is middle aligned, then halve whatever offset we came up with. Ow, my brain. Ow. But only if it's actually changed. That's the other thing. Oh my god. This is really starting to hurt my brain. Yeah, definitely not back up to full speed yet. Okay, so hang on. The wheels are turning, I swear. Right, yeah. Okay, so I'm calculating my new offset and then want to compare them against the current offsets, and if they're different, write the new offsets back to the array so we know, so we've kept a record of them, and then refresh the image. Refreshing the image is going to be a little bit complicated because it actually needs to take the button state into account. Really difficult to test, we'll not bother, to be honest. Okay, yeah, okay, we don't actually need the current one here at all because it's always going to be 0 if we're aligned to the top, yeah. Oh my god, these puzzles are getting quite tricky that I'm making for myself. All right. We then need to compare our new offsets to the ones we have stored. And if they're different, apply them and rewrite them. Okay. All right. Okay. First of all, let's write them back because that's the hardest one to spot if I forget to do it. So let's do that one first. Then we're going to apply. Okay, so our offset should be the total rows. It should be the negative because we're moving it above where we're starting from. Okay. Top rows, which I think was the bottom of the item immediately above before the one we're placing, and then we're adding the height of the one we're placing to it. So that should do the job. And this one's much simpler. It is literally total columns, again negated. So we're moving so by default we're left aligned, so we're moving it left by its entire width, should make it right aligned. And if we're actually horizontally centered, we halve that to put it in the middle. And we're writing them back, and now we actually need to apply it. So, oh, was it update? It was update, wasn't it? So now we need to actually, oh, we need to loop through all of the items we've just placed. So I'm just going to copy this loop here just for the sake of my sanity. And yeah. So now we need to pick the right image for the job. So I'm going to just put that there for now. And then if we're interacting, oh, so I'm just having a bit of a think here. How am I going to know from here? How am I going to know from here which image is the appropriate one for that particular item? Because I don't have any storage of which one is idle or hovered or active or whatever. And I guess I could store the image I most recently wrote to it. It's a bit iffy to kind of like store that as an extra, but I guess I could. Don't really like that, but it's definitely doable. Okay, so let's find everywhere we use the idle image. Okay, this is when we're expanding them, right? Yep, that's fine. And this is where we're actually applying it. So yeah, that's there. That's where by default we apply the idle image, because if the mouse is hovering over it, we're going to apply that in the first frame. Okay, so we've kept a record now of exactly which image is currently applied to that button. And if I can find the code I was just working on, there it is. There, is this it? Oh my god, I've lost it. Where is it? Oh, there it is. So the image is going to be the we've got our image, we've got our offsets to apply. So now we go to the image component and we tell it to update. Man, this has ended up so complicated. I wonder how much easier this would be if I just wrote something bespoke rather than trying to build an entity system. Don't really need that in the variable. The good news is once I've written this, I shouldn't really need to touch it. Okay, that will probably work. Let's find out. Will it even compile? It compiled, that's exciting. So it's still currently to the right and below. So let's just check that our introduction script definitely actually told it to do something. It did not. So let's align it to the bottom. That should... It didn't do anything. The worst kind of problem. Okay, let's try aligning it to the right, see if that does anything. That also didn't do anything. Am I definitely actually preserving that information? Am I actually storing it somewhere? So we've got the horizontal alignment. Definitely putting it away. Right, let's have another look at this. So we're fetching the vertical alignment. Comparing it, and it should be good. Okay, let's try putting in some crashes and just see if we can figure out which branch it's not hitting. I should double check this is definitely implemented because I wouldn't put it past myself to leave that stubbed. Okay. Okay, it is definitely hitting... Where's the inspect? There it is. It is definitely hitting this. So next up, is it actually finding anything to realign? No, it's not finding anything. Why isn't it finding anything? That's a bit mystifying because it's definitely working up here. Oh yeah, I should probably also apply the offsets here as well. Let's see if that aligns the bottom row a bit more. No, that's not doing anything either. Huh. Let's check what I've got here. I've definitely got it aligned to the I've got it aligned to the right, I've got it aligned to the bottom. So I'm tempted to also put like a cursor in there or something just so I can see exactly how it's attached. In fact, I'm just going to put it back onto his feet just so I can see exactly what it's supposed to be attached to. Yeah, why isn't that moving? Okay, so that's definitely not moving at all. All right, okay. So is it definitely hitting this? Is it definitely actually... Oh, that was wrong. Is it definitely actually calculating an offset? Yes, it's definitely calculating something. And we can be pretty confident it's changed from 0 because it was definitely hitting this. But it just doesn't seem to be finding any matches. Let's have another look here. So the component ID, this has never been reassigned, has it? It's always been... Yeah, it's always been the list that we're appending to. Found component ID should always be this. I can't see an obvious reason that wouldn't iterate for the whole list. Huh. Huh. Why isn't this working? Oh, I'm not going to be able to let this go until I fix this. Next question is, why isn't this realigning? Here, why are these two here lined up? They shouldn't be. Let's try putting a number in here, like a fixed number, and see what happens. Oh, that's unexpected. It did absolutely nothing. Ha. Huh. Why is that done? Why has that done nothing? I'm so confused. We don't, like, say, reassign this anywhere, do we? Anywhere that could be breaking it. Oh, hang on. Hang on. I might know what it is. In here, I'm going to have the bit where it calculates the position on screen. And I'm not subtracting the offset. Ah! Spent all that time like calculating that that offset, not using it. Oh no. Okay. We can get rid of all of our debugging logic in here now. We know what's probably going on. All right, that isn't quite what I expected, but that's progress, believe it or not. Why is it all the way down there? Have I left that hack in to basically like position it 100 pixels out? No, I haven't. So why is it all the way down there? Let's left align it again. Oops. Because it looks like it's moving the wrong way, which doesn't quite... Oh, I've made this a minus, not a plus. What am I doing? What am I doing? Ah. Build. Okay. All right. So that's now the bottom right corner is now kind of like a line below his feet. So I should be able to put this to 1.6. I should be able to middle align the horizontal alignment. And this should put the dollar box above his head. Oh my God, what a journey that was. Oh. Well. Does let me see, does it move with the camera shakes? Oh, it does. Very nice. So all the updates are working nicely. Well, I'm going to commit that. Let me just check for it to do in here. No more to dos. Ah, that can go. That's now being done. That can go. It's now being done. The rest are basically optimizations. And this can now be aligned. Happy days. Okay, so next time, I guess we're going to start building up some of the initial cutscene conversation. I've got some ideas of what kind of dialogue's going to go in there, but I'm going to avoid thinking too hard about it because I need to go to sleep. Have a great evening, and I'll see you another time.